Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I see that we're live, and welcome this afternoon as we continue on in the reading of our latest book, The Church Lie and the Biblical Alternative. Thanks again for joining us today. If you would like to chime in on our talk today, you can do so on our Facebook page, okay, and or email us at mail@tank.online, okay, and I will go to our email monitor here and check from time to time to see if a message comes in, or again you can join us on our Facebook page, The Church Lie, and make some comments there, okay? Kind of looking for a video on our Facebook page, not able to find it, so, but nevertheless, we'll get going here, and we'll finish up a little unfinished business from last week, okay, in talking about Noah's Ark. And I think I got an email from Andy, and him and I will, in the near future, be doing a one-day seminar on Noah's Ark and the importance of being accurate about what the Ark really was, and so on and so forth. Now, making the Ark something that it's not, why is that important? Well, the way the Ark has been presented as some kind of engineering marvel way back in the day, in the beginning of civilization, when Noah and his family were out and about, making what he built some kind of engineering feat that really didn't come in, that, you know, as far as shipbuilding is concerned, doesn't come around till probably the 16th century, okay? I do believe the Ark would have been relative in size to the Titanic. Our contention is yes, it's important to note that Noah's Ark was not a ship. You couldn't rightly call it a boat, because this thing was like, 500 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall, all right? So you wouldn't want to call it a boat, and it was a ship. It would have been an engineering feat. And we talked about this last week. One of the reasons being is that the way it's presented as a ship and not simply something designed to float, it would have depended heavily on water displacement to stay afloat, okay? And we discussed all the other problems with that, which brings up a lot of controversy as far as the accuracy of the Word of God and so on and so forth. So to kind of finish up last week, all right, what our contention is that the Ark was just a super duper floating machine, okay? And I want to refer you, if you go to our Boxcast Prep, okay, let's go to paulspassingthoughts.com, okay, and go to where we go. We're on number 12, Boxcast number 12, in our book review. And I had sent this picture to Andy earlier on, and what is this? Well, you know, the logging companies back in the day, in fact, they still might do it, but you can do it this way. This is the transport of a bunch of logs downstream to the mill from where the logs were cut. And as you can see, what they did, according to this picture, they just bundled a bunch of logs together like one big huge log, and as you can see, floated it down the Mississippi River or whatever it was as a way to transfer these logs to the mill. And this thing is 700 feet long. The arc was something like 500 feet long. Now, how tall or what kind of circumference would this bundle of logs have that they all had bundled together with chains here? Well, it's really hard to say. But at least 30 foot. Like, if you stood beside this, of course you can't see, you see those men standing at the top, and depending on what percentage of this thing is above water, in comparison to those men, what's above water is looking like about 12 feet or so, okay? So at a 50% rate, you're looking at something 30 feet. For all practical purposes, this thing is pretty close to the size of what the ark is. Not as tall, okay, maybe not as wide, but made up for in length. Pretty much the same thing. So what's my point showing this picture? Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to note, okay, that the ark really wasn't that big of a deal, okay, as far as the construction of it. Noah and his 3 sons and their wives didn't have any kids, okay, they were adults. Women, pretty cool back then, probably worked right alongside of the men in the fields, whatever, okay. So you have, how many of them? You've got 8 of them, right? So you've got 8 of them, and they had like 75 to 100 years, some people think 120 years to build this thing. The construction of it would have been very simple, okay? God said, build me an ark out of gopher wood or cypress wood or whatever you want to call it. Be sure of this, whatever kind of wood it was, it had a density that was very buoyant. Alright, so let's look at these logs. This is not a watertight deal. Water is able to get all up in between of these logs, and what's dry, and where all these men are standing, is like, above water. Now, it's very unlikely that Noah and his sons and their wives built some kind of, logs or some kind of, just a simple log floating device up on the bottom, and then a simpler structure, just like a house or a log cabin on top. That's unlikely, because God said, build me a box or an ark. And that seems to insinuate uniformity in the box, okay? And as we discussed last week, it had this little hole on top, and they couldn't see out. Andy and I will get more into this, but they couldn't see out. And of course, there's a free book for anybody who can tell me why Noah would build this square box out of logs, okay, with no way to see out, and only that one little hole that a grown person couldn't even crawl through at the top. All right, so basically there's no way out of this thing, and they can't see out. Okay, and Andy can get in, and I can get into more of the details. My main point here is that even though water can get all in between these logs and everything, and even if you take a bunch of logs and bundle them together like this, in size equal to the ark, it's gonna float. It's gonna float. All right? So, as this thing that I kind of drew up last week, okay, I think you can see that pretty good. Yeah, let's hold it up a little high here so we don't have a reflection, and you can probably see that pretty good. Okay, so basically what the ark does, see, size doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter here, okay? Because not only is the ark using buoyant materials, like everything going into this is buoyant, all right? Even if it doesn't use water displacement, even though it's just a bunch of logs like that, it's gonna float forever. How long? And not sink. What you've got there with this bundle of logs is something that's virtually unsinkable, okay? And then if you figure the way that the logs were put together in a box and also used water displacement, you know, and all the animals and everything in there, you know, basically, you know, you're looking at something that was completely unsinkable. All right. Now, thinner logs or something just that was waterproof, you know, would have been at the top. Now, you know, as we know, there were rooms. God said, build rooms. There were 3 decks. Okay, there were 3 decks. And where all the animals went, this, that, and the other, those decks and the inner rooms would actually not only be rooms to keep different animals and this, that, and the other, but would add structural support to this, right? And so anybody who builds furniture or knows anything about how, you know, old barns are built and this, that, and the other, using wood dowels or wood nails, and how strong that is, and also buoyant. So every bit of materials that would go into this are buoyant. You know, the wood nails or dowels. And if you know how wood dows together, you also know that it's incredibly strong. All right? Of course, God told Noah to seal this inside and out with pitch, so waterproofing it wouldn't have been any problem. But also note that even if this thing leaked a little bit, it's not going to sink, right? It's not going to sink, okay? Because all the logs are buoyant. Now, if they held the logs together with dowels or wood nails, where you make these wood rods and then you drill holes through your logs that you want to dow together, a little bit smaller than the dowel. And what you do, you beat that thing down through both logs and it compresses, okay? And it's just super strong. And what would have made it super duper strong is, imagine if they coated those nails with pitch before they even drove them in. So as that pitch kind of dries out, talking about glue, I mean, so building this ark would have been super simple, okay? You know, and size wouldn't have mattered. Ark, okay? It doesn't matter how big it is. The thing's going to float. Now, obviously, you know, they didn't go cutting down trees that were 500 foot long so that, you know, the runs were continuous, okay? That wouldn't have been any problem. Just imagine like log cabins, okay? And we talked last week about the story of the log cabin that was in a flood and it was just floated for weeks up and down this river. Why? Well, you know, log cabins float, even though, you know, in a flood, water's going to be inside of the log cabin. It's still going to float because the logs are buoyant. And then you put water displacement on top of that, and boy, you know, it's just going to float, okay? And then, of course, you've got the pitch inside and out, all right? It's a structure that would have been indestructible, okay? And so basically, probably what they did was built sections, okay? Built sections and then dowed them together. They could have hewn their logs. They could have stacked them and made sure they got a lot of pitch where it's rounded. Or they could have, you know, the logs, hewing logs down to where they're nice, straight, and round, are pretty ancient wood tools. Okay, that wouldn't have been a problem. Another thing they could have done is just not only cut the logs, smooth the logs down, but did one of these deals where they flattened the top and the bottom, so you got a log, and then where they put them together, okay, they just flattened them out so that they would, you know, get more of an area for the pitch. I'm assuming they probably not only put pitch on the outside and inside, but also in between the logs. As you can tell, I'm pretty convinced that the ark was made from logs and not hewn planks, okay? I don't think Noah and his son made planks, okay? Because once you get into building a ship framework, and then using planks, all right, you lose your buoyancy, and now you're depending on some pretty heavy-duty engineering in order to get the water displacement that you need to float this ship 700 feet long, 75 feet wide, I think it was, and like 45 feet tall, okay? So, you know, that's not what we're talking about here, okay? So, another thing that I talked about last night is that as far as reinforcing the inside, they could have cut planks and then dowed those planks vertically against the horizontal logs, and then used shorter dowels that had splints in the middle. And then when you're talking about coating those with pitch and wedging them with shims on top of it, you're just talking a structure that would have been incredibly rigid, incredibly buoyant, incredibly strong, and very simple to manufacture. Okay? Very simple to manufacture. This wasn't any engineering marvel. It was a flotation device. It was a big, huge flotation device. And due to the design and the materials it was made from, size wouldn't have really mattered. I mean, you know, size really is no big deal here. Okay? If one log cabin will float, even without using water displacement, so you need a real big floating device to keep lots of animals and stuff like that. Well, you just dow a bunch of log cabins together, seal it with pitch inside and out to where you got water displacement coming into play on top of that. Okay? So what I'm saying is, if you take a log cabin and seal it with pitch inside and out to where, you know, water can't get through, you've got a boat, is basically what you have. You got a houseboat that's just going to float on down the river or the lake or any place you want it to go. All right? So I just wanted to finish up those thoughts about Noah's Ark. As far as some kind of 20th, first century, you know, something that would be a marvel even in this century, and supposedly Noah and his family did it, you know, that many thousands of years ago? No. You know, no big deal really. Okay? You're talking cutting down trees, hewing them down into smooth logs, okay, and dowels and pitch, and a lot of it, and 75 to 100 years to build the thing, okay? So what we need is a ark of theology to rebut this lame church attempt to it's really supposedly an attempt at apologetics, and really it just accomplishes the opposite, okay? It creates more skepticism and questions amongst unbelievers than what it does to help. I mean, people who are already indoctrinated into church are going to be wowed by all of this, okay? You take an unbeliever down and show them this ark, what do they call it? The Ark Endeavor, the Ark Encounter. They're going to look at that and they're going to go, no. Okay? What we need is a good ark theology. Now, don't get me wrong. Once Noah and his family got this thing done, it would have been a sight to behold. Okay? But it would have been pretty rough looking, okay? You're looking at rough timber, there's just no doubt that you're looking at least this. You're not looking at anything that's a finished product. When I used to be a builder, we would call this rough framing. Okay? You know, maybe in some places the bark is even still on the logs. Okay? Probably not, because they wanted to get the pitch in there and this side. This would have been a big old honking, pretty ugly thing. Awesome to look at, this, that, and that, but pretty ugly. Okay, pretty rough looking. Alright? So, it's meant to be rigid. Other things I'm not going to mention at this point. But not, you know, not eye candy or appealing to the eyes, or whatever you would call that. Not that kind of engineering at all. Just really, here's the word I'm looking for. It was crude. Okay? It was just a simple, crude, yet effective flotation device. All right? And Andy and I can get on all to the details later on. What else do we have in regard to what's trending today? Let's talk about, we could talk about that. Let's click on this top link here. Okay. And this is something that I ran across on Twitter. All right. There's another girl, I even signed like her. I even signed up to follow her on Twitter. These are amazing young ladies, some of them not so young, but just amazing women. We got, her name is, looks like Melissa Olden, okay, and then I forget the other lady's name. But these are women who survived an abortion, okay, to where the laws were such to where when they were born, if they weren't dead, you know, you just leave them for dead out on the table and wait around long enough and hope they died. Well, these two didn't, all right? And I forget the other young lady's name, but you know, of course, they go around and they're preach for pro-life and you know this, that, and the other, and do a great job. Their testimonies are riveting. This, that, and the other. So on Twitter, you know, they conjure up a bunch of hate too. This lady said, tweeted her and said, you know, you just need to die. And her response was, well, I was born in an abortion clinic, so I'm not quite ready to die at your command yet. I was born in an abortion clinic. I don't know what you would call that, okay, but it was it was a real keeper, okay. Whoever the other lady was, she, you know, pulled down what she had said after thinking about it. I'm sure it didn't look too good. But anyway, these two ladies are amazing, and of course the unfortunate thing is as amazing as these two women are, and you know, like me, for a lot of years, if you're seeking after God in America for the past couple of 100 years, you know, you're just going to assume the place to go to pursue God is church. Now, I know everyone doesn't buy into that. You got your Zen Buddhist, you know, they go after Buddhists, but, you know, especially if you grew up during the 60s, you've got those free spirits that believe that they can pursue God just by them, but they're the minority. Most people, when they're seeking God, they're going to go to church. I mean, it's just assumed church is where you go to have a relationship with God. That's the assumption, okay, until now, all right? And I think Andy and I make the case very well in this church what true Christian identity ought to be, all right? So, it's a shame, okay? Perhaps these two women, will evolve in their assumptions. And one of the things that we get into here that is addressed in the book is this whole question of how we interpret the Bible. All right? How we interpret the Bible. So, people go to church and they assume when they sit out and listen or sit in Sunday school or sit out and listen to the sermon, the assumption is that the pastor is reading the Bible or exegeting the Bible or explaining the Bible from a common sense literal standpoint. And of course, that's not true. In the book, we go into detail how church interprets the Bible. Now, even though Catholics are more honest about what church is all about, salvation by church, even though they're more honest about it, the Catholic Church really doesn't claim a literal, what we call historical grammatical interpretation of the Bible. All right? They don't really claim that. Now, a lot of confused Catholics do. They'll sit and tell you, we get our truth from the Bible. Our authority is the Bible. Our authority for truth is the Bible. Well, obviously what they mean, giving Catholics some credit, if you hear a Catholic say that, and you often do, and you say, no. What you really mean is that the Bible is your authority insofar as the Pope is interpreting it. Okay? And most Catholics are going to go, well, yeah, of course that's what I meant. All right? So you got to understand what a Catholic means when they say that. Now, when Protestants say that intellectually, they are claiming that, Protestants are claiming that all of church orthodoxy is based on a historical grammatical interpretation of the Bible. And it is not. And it is not. And we go into this in the book. The Bible, according to church, particularly the Protestant church, is based on the historical redemptive hermeneutic. Okay? Now, when you think hermeneutic, please don't limit that to a method for interpreting or understanding the Bible. Please don't interpret it that way. Don't stop there. Whether the historical redemptive method or the historical grammatical method, these are also two views of reality. These are also two views of reality. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, we explain it in the book, but once you understand it from reading in the book, you will see it everywhere. Okay? You will see it everywhere. So, the story of her life, and bless her heart, she's wonderful. She's awesome. She is, no doubt in my mind, saved. Okay? If you would talk to these two ladies and ask them what they believed salvation is, intellectually, or really better stated intuitively, they would have a sound understanding of justification by new birth. Okay, no doubt about it. All right? But then, being churchians, though, basically what's going to happen here is they're going to be verbalizing things that are church orthodoxy without really thinking through what's being said when they say it. So in her life story here, she's got this quote. Okay? That's annoying. Okay. So she's got this quote here from Evenda Lippens or Lippens, okay? Could be Lippens. Okay, so here's the quote. Your current circumstances are part of your redemption story he is writing. Got it? Okay? What is this? This is reality is narrative, or metaphysical narrative, or meta-narrative, or grand narrative. Well, what is it, Paul? This is reality as, think of it as God or a group of gods sitting in a movie theater watching a movie that they wrote and produced, okay, and watching it for their own self-glory and self-love, okay? So this is really the best way to think about this. And the historical redemptive hermeneutic is really synonymous with reality as story. Okay, so how does this work? What are we talking about when we're talking about that? Again, the best way to think about it is God or gods sitting back and watching a movie they produced to self-glory in to glorify themselves. And we hear this all the time. Hey, look, you know the five solas, okay? For God's glory alone, okay? That is literally, I don't know what you, but it's literally for God's glory alone, okay? Nothing else matters. God does everything, or gods, depending on the religion. This hermeneutic isn't unique with Protestantism. This is a very common way to look at reality across the board. This is pretty ancient, okay? And so everything that happens in reality is part of the pre-written narrative that God or a plethora of gods wrote for their own self-glory, Okay? So, basically, you're living in a story. You're living in a story that God pre-wrote. Well, of course, Protestantism is steeped in predestination and predeterminism. All of reality is a story that God wrote before, the foundations of the earth. Okay? So, of course, everything is predetermined. Reality is a story that God wrote. All right? So, but you run into a problem. Okay? If God wrote this story, obviously God created the character of evil and wrote evil into the story. God create the creator of evil. All right? And for the most part, Protestant theologians concur with that. Okay? God is sovereign, right? So, in order to glorify himself, and in order to make his glory more known, God created sin to be written into the narrative or story of reality to lift up the glory of himself. It's kind of like this. Okay? Remember our cross chart? All right, remember our cross chart? Okay? The eviler, if that's a word, we see ourselves, the bigger the redemption story is, and the holier God looks. So basically the goal here is not to be more and more like our Father and make a small cross, but to come more and more in grips and see more and more our own evil so that God is more glorified. Okay? So, when she quotes that here to make a point, I don't really think that she's stopping to think about what's really being said here. Okay? Now, read on. She begins, after using that quotation, she begins by saying, I don't believe God originally wrote abortion into my life. Okay? As God is the creator of life, but when it was introduced by man, or in my case a woman, he rewrote the story of my life around it to create the story of a life that is more intricate, more redemptive, more grace-filled than anything else could have planned or written. Okay? And then here's another quotation from a Jodi Picoult or something like that. She's quoting people whose names are hard to pronounce. Quote, how do you know that you are not part of a book? That someone's not reading your story right now. Okay, so you see this language, all of this language in regard to reality as story, pre-written by some being to reveal something about them to man for their own glory. Okay? Alright, so let's look at her paragraph. I don't believe God originally wrote abortion into my life as God is the creator of life, but when it was introduced by man, or in my case a woman, he rewrote the story of my life around it. Okay? So, God didn't write abortion into the story, man did. Of course, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and a host of others would vehemently disagree with that. Okay? God is the creator of life. Okay? So God is the creator of life. Well, Okay, so man introduced it, right? Man introduced abortion into your redemptive narrative of reality or your metaphysical story. So, didn't God create man? What? When God created man, he didn't see that coming? So, basically, indirectly, okay, you can't get around the fact that you've got God creating abortion and writing it into the story. All right? Other problems that you have here is even if man did rewrite the story, okay, it just runs into big problems because even if man is the one who God allows to introduce, what's being said here? Either God's writing the metaphysical story, or he co-wrote the metaphysical story with man. Who are the authors here? Is it just God, or is it a co-authorship with man? Okay? Andy and I are co-authors of this book. Is reality a co-authorship between God and man? All right? So let's say it is. All right? So now you've got to ask the question, well, why would God intervene and rewrite your story, okay, and not other people? What makes you so special? Okay? Well, that's grace. It's unmerited favor. Okay? It's undeserved. And nobody deserves it. Okay. Well, then what made you so special? Okay? See the problems we get into? So, what's one reason Andy and I wrote this? What's one reason Andy and I wrote this? Okay. After 10 years of research and what we've done in tank ministry in the past 10 years, we've really just, do you know what we've done? We've established a framework of salvation. You know, we've pretty much established we've pretty much established the difference between justification by new birth versus justification by faith. Okay, what is really justification by perfect law keeping, but I'm not going to address that right now. While supposedly introducing a gospel that is faith-based alone, as opposed to those pesky Catholics, what you really have with Protestantism in general, and the church in particular, is a law-based justification. With the Apostle Paul, it's purely law-based. Okay? It's purely a law-based justification while claiming that it is a justification by faith alone. Actually, it's a justification by new birth. All right? Maybe we'll get into that more in the next time. So basically, what this book seems to seeks to do, along with ministry, is to say, hey, look, okay, all we did was switch dark ages. That's all we did. During the reign of the Catholic Church, really the institutional church, it was definitely a dark age. Okay? Protestantism is, the integration of Protestantism, church in general, is really the integration of the Bible, caste spirituality, okay, salvation by church integrated with Enlightenment ideas. Okay? Basically what we have right now and have had since the Protestant Reformation is Dark Age light. And one thing we need is really a whole new metaphysical outlook, really a whole new metaphysical biblical outlook, okay? Or what you might call biblical metaphysics, okay? That's what we need. Now, others have played with it, with open theism, okay? So people are starting to do this. And open theism is kind of a jump in the right direction. Okay, I have issues with it, but open theism is definitely a step in the right direction. Although, you know, the work is really just begun. Let's see if we have any comments here. We'll check email first. Okay. Let me see here. Scott, let's talk. Mr. Where? Okay. Well, we've got one comment on email here. Okay. Let's go ahead and open that up. Okay. Where we go? So on 2K, you have been placed. Ooh. Or, well, oh. I know a few is placing these tracks, but I have a few questions. Okay, we got a good one here. Okay, and finally, we can blame Andy for something. Okay, finally, we can blame Andy for something. He put together this 3 questions website. Andy's put together about 2 or 3 websites that are awesome and had these tracks made up. And I've always thought, yeah, 3questionsweebly.com is what the track is based on. And churchians are so dumbed down, okay, that, I look at these websites Andy puts up, and you can really see Andy's effort to make it as understandable as possible. And I've always thought, man, good job, Andy. I just don't know how you make it any simpler, okay? But I still think, especially in regard to what people in church believe about the law, I just think they're not going to be able to get their minds around it. Well, the reason, the absolute way, and we're like the New England Patriots, okay? Even though in the Super Bowl they couldn't get ahead by much, and in the fourth quarter it's like 3-3, they kept grinding away, okay? They kept grinding away, and finally the dam broke. And that's what we've been doing for about 10 years, just learning and saying, how can we make this as simple as possible? How can we frame this and package it in a way to where people get it, all right? Well, here's how we'll know that we're getting close, or we're getting warm, or we're getting better. When you cause trouble, all right? That's how you know. And apparently, I delight to read this email that apparently we've caused some trouble. And I read, Mr. Dosey, I am aware of you because on 2 equations do you believe a true gospel? A gospel tracts have been placed in our church literature rack and men's restroom without our approval. Okay? So there's people in church that get it. Bless their hearts. Anyway, in both cases, I've removed them. I don't know if you or someone associated with you is placing these tracts, but I have a few questions. Well, here they are. Why would somebody place tracts in a church without the permission of that church's leadership? Hold the fort. Hold the fort. Oh my, I think we have tomorrow's Boxcast already lined up, don't we? I mean to tell you, the way we're doing this with the book reading and stuff, there is just no... I've hit on something here because I'm going to nursing school, okay? I've got, here at the Potter's house, we have Mom, a grandson, a son, 2 beagles, and a cat, okay? I got that going on. We got 3 properties, okay? And I'm still having time to do this. So it's like the material is just like easy in your face, as easy as it was for Noah to build the ark, and we're just rolling here, okay? So, hark. I thought the church wasn't a building. And I thought church isn't an authority-based hierarchy. I thought we're all just family here. I thought church was a body. Okay? I thought the church is not a building, it's the people. Well, why in the world would we go into the church building, okay, in their realm of authority and put things there without the leadership's permission? 2, I am unclear what the goal of this track is. I went to 3questionsweebly.com and I found it to be confusing to even me. And he is seminary trained. Okay? Seminary trained. Well, seminary trained in church orthodoxy. And we... Okay? Whoa! We're running low on these. I can't be messing it up. Please give me a call at 740-369. Well, I won't read the number there. If you would rather not talk, that's fine. In that case, please stop placing tracts in our church without approval in him. I won't tell the name of the church or this, that, or the other just yet. Okay, yeah, I'll be talking to him, okay, and that will be an interesting, conversation. Maybe we just ought to have, basically him on a Boxcast to talk frankly and live. So, alright, so we might come back and address that a little bit later. Let's now go to Facebook, check for anything that we might have there. Okay, you ready? Alright, so, let me see here. I don't think we're still rolling here. Okay, let's see.